Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production with Eric and Andrew. In our weekly conversations, we explore how we approach our committed relationships as a powerful catalyst for mindful leadership and inner dominance. As men who intentionally lead our powerful feminine partners, we share insights for discovering how the craft of consciousness deepens our capacity to love, serve, and connect with our true selves.
Andrew, good to see you.
You too, my friend. It's been a few weeks.
Yeah, you're in by the ocean, if I know.
Yeah, the last time we recorded, I was packing up our house and we were to leave on this big journey of full-time RVing, and now we are on it. Yeah, we're all the way down by the Gulf of Mexico for the next couple of weeks and then onward from there.
That's awesome. Well done. I know I heard your podcast, your other podcast, and just speaking about all the journey of that and the adventure. Point people to Andrew's other podcast with Dawn. There's a great little backstory on where they're up to and navigating all of that. So
Dom Sub Devotion.
Dom Sub Devotion. And here we are with conscious dominance. So that dominance, that part of that. Today I thought we'd dive into polarity as a tool. And first off, I'd like to define polarity. And I remember you having some pretty strong, pretty unique points of view around polarity. I would love to hear your thoughts. What even is that? What does that mean?
I'm glad you started there, because I was going to encourage you to, or us to go there first, because you kind of have to know what the hell is it that we're even talking about when we talk about polarity. And like in a big picture kind of way, the way I think of polarity is that in nature, everything finds its balance, right? You splash the water, eventually the water is going to find its level again. No matter how much it gets stirred up, everything finds level. And just in nature in general, no matter what happens, the forces of nature are always trying to bring things into into a sense of homeostasis. It happens in our bodies. It happens everywhere in our universe. When we talk about polarity is really just like opposites attract. Mm-hmm. I think, every one of us, I believe, is probably at some point, whether it's in a friendship, romantic relationship, something, we've felt this really strong pull towards someone who is really, really different from us. Mm-hmm. This was my first marriage. Like, everything about us was different. And when we were young and immature, that felt like attraction. It's polarity. It's the difference. And we have to think about it in terms of, again, from a big picture perspective, and I'm sure we'll dive into this from 100 different places today, but from a really big picture perspective, you have to think about it like a magnet. A magnet has a pole, a positive pole and a negative pole. And the more intense the positive and negative charge of those poles, the more they attract. Like, the more magnetic that magnet is, the harder it pulls on steel, the stronger it sticks. Mm-hmm. And also, the stronger those charges of the positive and negative pole of the magnet, the more it repels. So it's the same thing that causes it to be magnetic also causes it to be repulsive. Mm-hmm. So polarity, when we talk about it in terms of a relationship, is really a matter of the difference between a man and a woman. The difference, like, when we encourage and even champion or cheerlead for the making men and women, dominant, submissive, masculine, feminine, whatever words you want to say, different from each other, by celebrating the ways that we're different, we create real, genuine attraction.
Are you telling me then that the dominant is the masculine?
That's exactly what it is. And really, what we're getting at, I think, with this topic is, in order for us to maximize the polarity in a relationship, we don't have to do anything to her. We become the strength of the masculine pole or the positive pole in a sexual manner, and therefore balance the negative pole. And as a man in our heart, we become this both magnetic and repulsive thing at the same time. Because one of the ways I love to say this is that you have to be able to be repulsive in order to be attractive.
Explain.
But yeah, we have to maximize the inner polarity that we hold in ourselves, and we'll magnetize, attract, turn on, inspire submission in all of the women that are right for us.
Explain.
And repel all the ones that aren't.
Explain to me what you mean by maximize the repulsion.
Let me say it this way. On our Instagram account, as we've grown, when we were new, the only people that really found us were people who agreed with. And, our Instagram account just passed 40,000 followers this week.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to reach a wider and wider audience. We got seen by, I think, 1 million people last month. And the wider audience we reach, the more we get comments and direct messages talking about how terrible this is, how abusive the relationship this must be, and how misogynistic I am, and what a setback for women that Dawn is for being a submissive. And we get statements and energy from people that are really repulsed by us. In being in the energy of acceptance and encouragement of who we really are, we are also pissing some people the fuck off. And we have to be okay with both.
That's a good way of, that's when we say the word polarizing.
Yeah.
That if you embrace polarity, you are embracing polarization. Is that another way of saying it?
Yeah. You're going to polarity, polar opposites, all of these things are getting at this idea that we have two ends of the spectrum, and the farther we push ourselves to one end of the spectrum, the more attractive we're going to be. That magnet pulling steel.
Mm-hmm.
The more attractive we're going to be to what's for us, and also the more repulsive we're going to be for what's not for us.
Mm-hmm.
So by being in polarity, we are polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much balance for nature to find when everything tries to be the same. And this is why equality doesn't work in relationships. It works great for friendships. It works great for comfort, but it kills the sexual attraction, and it kills the emotional intensity in a relationship when a man and a woman are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no pull, there's no space to attract or magnetize. There's nothing polarizing. It's just flat.
Mm.
That desire that nature has to pull us back into balance, or to rectify, I should maybe say it that way, to rectify the difference
mm-hmm.
between two forces.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist when everybody's the same and everybody's just... This is why, couples that just sit around and watch TV all night, every night together and stare, who don't do anything to maximize the polarity between them, they eventually stop wanting to fuck each other.
Right.
They get very comfortable with each other. They can still be very friendly with each other and feel a lot of affection towards each other, but the intensity of desire fades over time if you aren't intentional about being polarizing.
One of the things that I was thinking about in thinking about this was the polarity as a tool. That was the title that I had. And if we can become aware that this energy is out there, and that we actually, it's like gravity. If we're unaware of gravity, then we can't use gravity. We might just jump off something and then have something impact. We're like, why did that happen? Well, that's the way most relationships exist. They're kind of going through life as though oblivious to the gravity that's there, as you said. And so because of that, they're wondering why the relationship has lost its fire or what that is. And if they can realize that you can actually use polarity as a tool to turn the volume up, and that there are these very specific things that can be done in a relationship in order to polarize the situation. And one of the things that this quote keeps coming to mind is that if you do not change yourself or work towards something, movement forward, you're choosing whatever is in your life. Whatever is going on in your life, if you're not working to change it, you're choosing it. And so men often are choosing a status quo because they feel like it's like if you had a construction project and you weren't working on it, you're choosing where it is. That means you're choosing that status quo that exists right there. As soon as you have a tool to move forward, to move it, to improve it, to make it better, then we can go somewhere. And I think it's really important, and we've talked a lot about this previously, but that polarity is an energy. There are specific things that we can do, but if we don't recognize in ourselves, when you talk about having the energy in a guy down in his cock versus the energy of a woman being up here in her chest, can we feel the difference in that? Can we feel when the energy is riding up here or when it's down here? Can we feel where we walk into a room and there's polarity? Can we feel that attraction? Can we feel anger? Can we feel when someone walks in and they had a bad day, you could just feel their energy? All of that is energy. All the emotional spectrum is energy. Can we recognize that our capacity to dictate our energy is our capacity to use polarity as a tool? And so I'd love for you to explain to men and to women and to whoever's listening, how can we use polarity as a tool?
That's a really excellent way of asking that question, and I appreciate it, because it reminds me of, and you'll appreciate this because you have a background in construction. I have never actually worked in construction, but I grew up in a home. My dad was in the construction industry, like trades, and he taught me like everything about what I need to know. So I can do a lot of the same shit that I could otherwise if I had worked in it. But he was helping me one time put flooring in a house that I owned. And the flooring we were putting in was a little bit thicker than the hardwood that was going in was thicker than the vinyl that was coming out. And so he handed me this tool. He's like, here, use this on these door frames. And I looked at it and like, I'd never seen this tool before. I'd never used it. I didn't even know what the hell it was or what it did. What it was I still don't know the name of it, but it was this cutoff tool that I could hold at the bottom of the door frame and cut the door frames up just a little bit so that the new flooring could slide underneath that door frame and fit where it wouldn't have fit before because of the thickness difference. Once I learned how to use it, then I could go around and I could make this. The tool already knew, like, it already did what it did. It didn't, its ability to do the cutting of the door frame was no different before I understood it or after I understood it. Now I just had the ability to use it. Then I could make everything work and happen. And that's really what polarity is when you talk about it as a tool. Like, it's already working in your life. Everyone who's listening to this, everyone on the face of the earth who never listens to this or finds us or hears us, polarity is working in everything all the time. But to really understand it, we can't just talk about polarity, because we can even use this word and misconstrue it in a way where, like, oh, I have to be more like, if I'm more like this, then I will get more like of what's over there. But if we just run off, for example, and become like the super machismo, abusive, like asshole jerk of a guy, because that's what our mental construct tells us that women want, like we can use polarity in that way, and we can some attraction and desire in a woman, but we can also really, really hurt people that way.
Yeah, the polarity swings too much. It's like you have to be skilled with the tool.
Right, exactly. If I just took that cutter that I wish I knew the name of it, because now I'm sounding like a real tool myself. I'm like, this tool, I don't even know what it did. If I just took that thing and started hacking at stuff with it, I could have messed a lot of things up. But what's important, I think, in understanding polarity and energy in a way that's useful is it's not actually polarity that we want. Polarity's already there. Polarity's already happening. It's not like we want polarity or we need to create polarity. Polarity already exists. What it is that we want is there's a certain, and the reason we would even pursue trying to use polarity as a tool is because we want the result of what happens when we are in a relationship that is polarized. So it's not polarity that we want, it's the energy of the intensity of the desire. Mm-hmm. It's the energy of that pull, right? That thing you feel in a new relationship, like where you can just feel that draw that you have to that other person.
That's polarity.
That's what we want.
That's polarity. Like new relationship energy is polarity.
Yep, absolutely. So learning to create that energy by recognizing where to deploy more strength, where to deploy more openness, and how to interact with a person to just maximize the laws of nature, the laws of polarity that are going to be in play no matter what. What we're really after is that intensity or that desire. Mm-hmm. And we can create that just like we can build something when we know how to use the tools and the materials.
Right. And this is, yes. And I keep thinking about energy. And what I mean by that too, like an emotional frequency and bandwidth. And that going back to a previous episode, we talked about taking things personally. And I think what's interesting is a lot of times when men, an example that I want to throw out here is that when men are in a place where they think to be in polarity is to be dominant, and to be dominant is to be controlling, and a woman does something that deviates from what they want, and then they react, and then they take it personally and let their frequency be drifted down, that woman then is the one in power because she's able to control his emotional bandwidth and his emotional frequency. In that's a misapplication. That's like a poor craft of the energy, because you think, oh, I'm going to control. Same thing happens in sports where a guy is a coach. He's like trying to get somebody else to do something. The guy doesn't do it or makes a mistake, and then he loses his shit. Him losing his shit in that moment is him going into his feminine. Same way with women. So our capacity as energy to keep composed, to keep cool, to keep in presence and not let whatever's happening to us fuck with our capacity to be still. And in that's polarity. Like that's the masculine pole, is at the end of the day is our capacity when there's storms happening to be still. That increases polarity. And so Data talks so beautifully about this, David Data, in his books about the polarity and how there's women that are hot and women that are cool and temperature and the different variety of that, but also just feminine women and just what it is to be around a feminine woman and what it is to be around a masculine man and what is the differences. And we need to the first thing that I want to throw out there is like any tool or like any craft that we're doing, first and foremost is an awareness that there is even a craft, that there is even a way to do it. And so we come in with humility and we come in with an awareness. We talk about this too, where you become conscious, like conscious dominance. The consciousness is to look in front of us and to notice, oh, look at the way she acts when I say it like this, or look at the way she is when my energy, when I'm getting really excited. Does that calm her, or does that actually make her really agitated? And you've got two sort of flames firing going. And what is it when she's getting really upset and you're still? And how does that affect? And what, like just observe the energy, observe the polarity. And this is where this tool, because it's like anything in the human relationship game, it's an art more than it is a science. I mean, there are a law, like there is the rules of polarity that just exist whether or not we know it, but the application of that is the craft of it is going to feel very much where we can't be too logic brain about it right at the beginning, especially.
So, this whole conversation brings me back to the years in Dawn's and my relationship. We've been married now for, coming up this next year will be 14 years. And we went kind of down the unconscious vanilla relationship path for the first 10 years of our relationship, the first 8 years of our marriage, before we started to deploy some of these changes. But in that period of time, we started out with that really intense new relationship energy. Mm-hmm. There was there was an intensity to the pull we had to each other, to the passion we felt for each other, to the sex, to the just the draw to each other in every way. It was huge. Mm-hmm. And then over time that started to fade. Mm-hmm. And I've always held to this belief, even when I had no evidence that it was possible. I always held to the belief that energy of what made a new relationship good didn't have to go away. Dawn at the time held the belief that that was something called the infatuation stage. Mm-hmm. And that it always went away, and that it was bound to fade into something different over time. And all the while it was fading away into something different that was still friendly, it was still we still had a lot of love for each other, we still had a lot of affection for each other, but the intensity, the passion, the sexual intensity especially, was really gone. It became very comfortable, was at play. Mm-hmm. Whether we liked it, as I became less solid, strong, and she became expressive mm-hmm. and less connected to her body, everything just kind of became like in the mushy middle. What I eventually had to come to grips with was the fact that I had to lead us back into a place of being able to bring this intensity back. I worked to grow into more and more strength, more solidity, eventually asking her to become my submissive and enter into this dominant-submissive dynamic, and then continuing over time to grow and grow and grow and grow in myself, in my strength, in my power. We've recaptured that intensity from mm-hmm. the beginning of our relationship and made it even better. Mm-hmm. Because now we have all of that, plus we have all of the years together. It means so much more to us than a new relationship does. So deploying polarity as a tool is a way to recapture that new relationship energy.
Whether you know how to do it or not, that's what you're doing. I mean, there's no way to recapture that relationship energy without polarity being in play. So mm-hmm. people could do it unconsciously. There's just like this thing. They don't know that that's what's happening, but that's what's happening. Like if you still feel hot for your woman after 50 years, it's because there's polarity. Like yep. that's what that is. It's between the two of you. And if you have a woman that's you're not attracted to in your life, and she's not attracted to you, and there's no sexual part, but you don't want to depart from her and you want to add spice to your life, it's not through date nights. It's not through all the shit that people tell you it is. It may be a part of that, but what's most necessary, what's most needed there is polarity. And that can happen by you telling her no. That can happen by you being more strict with her, by being more decisive, by taking more responsibility, by doing a lot of things that may at first be troubling for her, that may be at first actually polarizing for her. But if you are consistent with it, and if you take responsibility, and if you don't blame other people, and you are able to show up to your responsibilities and then enhance your field of responsibility to start considering her needs, oh shit, that shit, All of a sudden, she starts getting hot for you, and all of a sudden, there is the polarity. And it's not by being more romantic. It's not by talking more. It's not by being more in your feelings. All those things you need to do with someone else in order to tap into, that's helpful, and we talk about that. But as far as what the relationship goes, as far as how polarity goes, it's to take the masculine pole. It's to take these, for example, for myself, one of the things that I've talked about before, but just getting up in the morning, the discipline of getting up every single morning at a specific time and getting out of bed and showing up to that has changed our relationship. I used to just stay in bed because we both work from home. We both have this sort of thing. It's a great time. I like morning sex. I just took that off the table and I said, I got to get up. We got to go day. This is the time. And I'm consistent with it. And it sucks. It's hard to do that every day. Or this is what time dinner is and being consistent with dinner. This is what time we're going to bed and this is what time we're going to bed and being consistent with those things. Time is a wonderful place to bring polarity in. If a woman is at all in her feminine, she's not going to be good with time. Don't be mad at that or upset at that. Just take responsibility for time in the relationship so that you become aware of that and then you inform her, preview all the different things that were helpful in that process. So that's one. Also financially, just taking responsibility with finances, making sure that there's budgets, limits, anything that we can bring a limitation to, we can bring a budget to, we can say no to, that we can provide some structure, provide some order. That's all tangible ways to bring polarity to a situation. Anytime we can bring clarity to a situation, all of these that seem very unsexy, actually for a woman who's a feminine being, she will find sexy. As long as we're consistent and as long as we're aware of the context and consider her needs and consider her in that. I think what she doesn't like is if we do all those things and we're not considering her or her needs or her context. But those are, I just think, some really tangible ways to say, okay, this is a way to do it, to deploy it. I talk about energy and all these other stuff that seems a little bit out here, but here's a real specific application of that.
Here's another one. Living your life with integrity, even when it's inconvenient to you and even when it's inconvenient to now. What do I mean when I say in integrity? I mean a life of congruence. I mean a life where you are the man that you say that you are. You stand for what you believe in. You know your values and you actually live up to them, even when it's personally inconvenient.
Truth. And it will reverberate. It will reverberate. That's a great one. And I think a great example of that is being impeccable with your word in the sense of, let's just say, just basic honesty, basic, if she catches you in a lie, if she catches you exaggerating, if she catches you out of integrity, she catches you deceiving. It's not about, oh, it's a little thing. Those little things matter. And how can we live our values, live what we say? And if we're a public person at all, and then she sees us not living like that, that's going to chip away at our integrity.
And back to something you said earlier too, all of this is about applying structure and order so that she doesn't have to be the one applying structure and order. Because the structure, order, these are masculine characteristics. Initiation. This is why, like, we have to lead this work, because if she's leading this work, if she's the one trying to get this kind of game started, just the very initiation of anything is a masculine energy trait. We have to lead. We have to be the ones setting the course. We are the ones who create structure and create order. And polarity means that she becomes the opposite of that. Her work is letting go of control. Her work in submission or in feminine expression, or, some people don't like the dom-sub terms. Fine. I think anybody who listens to this podcast probably does. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. The energy is the same. And that's why Dawn and I say, like, if we took off the collar, took off the labels, we went outside of calling ourselves dominant and submissive, nothing would change about our relationship. But the fact of the matter is that when we become more of the creator of structure, when we become the one, in your example, financially, we're setting a budget. Okay, the idea in that is now, because she doesn't have to be figuring out what the budget is, what can she afford to spend. There are boundaries within which she can be chaotic and free, because the feminine is chaos. The feminine is the chaos. We are the structure, and this whole dance is essentially we are creating places. We're creating spaces in our life as a couple where we've set structure and order, therefore she can be free inside of that. And that's how we get to start to play in this polarity. Because we've set good solid structure, she feels free. She starts to get that energy, that same energy that we felt in her when the relationship was brand new, that new relationship kind of spark that we felt from her. That'll start to come back the more that she feels safely held in a structure that we have set and created for her, that respects her needs and her desires, but it isn't just about giving her what she wants, because then she's in charge. It's about seeing the big picture and creating a space where she can be free and playful.
And like you said too, I think it's really important. I like what you said about anything that provides limits, anything that provides a boundary, that provides a container. I mean, we talked about that before with container and containment, but you know, the polarity to me is the active building of that said container. You know, like you could say a container, like in construction, it's done, you're done, and then you're on. The thing about a relationship is you have to think of it as every day you're building the relationship. And I think a lot of men don't realize that it's literally being built every day. Your energy matters every single day. Polarity is existent every single day. So every single day, you have to tend the polarity. It's not something like you just do it and then you get to go chill. And every time you go chill and check out and go watch your football, go smoke some weed, go get drunk, go look at porn, that's you saying, I don't need to be in polarity anymore. I'm going to go off and do something else for a moment. That's fine, but don't do that unconsciously, because that'll weaken the relationship. Be aware that in those moments, you're actually going into your feminine. You're actually depolarizing the situation. That's fine to do. We need to do that. Be that selective. Choose your poison. Pick your poison of how you're going to get into your feminine. Do it consciously. Be able to go in and then come out. And I think for me, one of the healthiest ways for me to go and tap into a more feminine space is in nature, because it's clean. I go in, I come in, I get something from it, and then I'm able to come back. But that's my girlfriend. That's my relationship on the side that I have. And when I've been able to really just tap nature and get that fulfillment there, then I'm not going to Rachel for that. I mean, she is my woman, but I'm not going to when I'm needing a hit, like that kind of needy hit kind of behavior. That's what becomes problematic. And I think what we have to do, and we'll get more into this, but ultimately we're providing a service, we're providing and giving to her, because she's going to be able to be in her relaxed state. She's going to be able to be in her kind of flowy space. I think a great example of this is if you ever travel with your woman, who's the one doing all the logistics? Who's buying the plane tickets? Who's setting up the hotel reservations? Who makes sure what time you get there? Who makes sure what the checkout is? If it's her doing it, then she's the masculine. She's the one in charge. Ultimately, whoever's doing the work, maybe it's his personal assistant that's doing it, maybe she is doing it, but whoever's ultimately responsible for that work to happen, whoever's ultimately responsible for being aware to make sure that you show up, to make sure that you leave. So often women take on those roles, especially as mothers, especially in a big family. That's them being in their masculine. You know, that's where I've said this in the past, that women that are mothers are really great conscious. Like they're essentially running the house, they're doing all the things, they're caring about everybody. But that's really what a really good mom that's really on it is, the one who's considering all those things. When you're taking care of all those things, like if you go on a tour, for example, they're taking care of all that. As a man, we're like, oh, we're relaxed. You know, it's like, cool, we got everything. Or it's like you get really good service at a restaurant or a bar. Like we pay money to be waited on, to be taken care of, to have everything taken care of. what we're doing in that notion is we're paying money to have someone consciously care for us, in a way consciously dominate us. Like we're receiving from them something. And if we're not aware of these dynamics and the differences and how they sort of play out, then we could have a woman who's really highly strung, and we're going to add more highly strung on her by having her, bitch, you take care of all that, you do all that, and then we think that we're being the dom because she's doing all the work, when in fact we're the one who's actually going to be more in our feminine, and she's going to be more in her masculine, which is why she's so stressed. You see a stressed woman, you see a woman in her masculine. They're almost a 1-for-1 ratio, that equation.
This is so much of what Dawn's and my relationship was before we started, and before really I started to turn these tables over. Everything you described. When we were in that vanilla, just kind of bored place in our relationship, she was being the mom and she was in charge of everything. She was running so much of life. She was in control of so much. She was exhausted. She was tired. I was checking out. I was like, I basically didn't feel like I had a place in my own life or in hers. And so I would basically just sit around, and she got praised by so many people for all of her self-discipline, for how hard of a worker she was, for how much she could manage to hold together, for her like ability and self-discipline when it came to getting in shape and keeping her body in good shape. Like, she was so rewarded and praised for being someone she wasn't, that it felt to her like she was doing a good job at being what she was supposed to be. But she wasn't being herself, which is why she felt so exhausted, so worn out, so tired. And then I'm not being myself. I'm not being in my true energy as a man to be in that masculine pole, because I'm sitting back, I'm being lazy, getting fat, complaining a lot, like hating my job, drinking, like all of the shit. It's just polarity is working. It was just working in opposite. And this is one of the most uncomfortable things for a man if you're listening to this conversation right here. If you are in a long-term relationship and the sex isn't intense, she doesn't want you as much as she used to, you are starting to feel like that desire to maybe move on and find someone else, either ditching the relationship or finding something on the side, or you're using porn a lot. If the relationship isn't giving you everything you need, it's on you. It's so easy to blame her. It's so easy to think that she's the one that's at fault, but it's always on you, because you gave up your strength. You stopped showing up. You let her take charge. You let her tell you what to do. And the only way that it gets better is by you reclaiming your own strength. And if you do, everything else will change too, because again, polarity is just happening. You don't have to make polarity happen. Polarity just happens. If you go this direction, something will change.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways, this is one of the great teachings and teachers for me, this relationship, you want to have growth as a man, get in a dom-sub relationship, get in a polarized relationship, because and
then commit to it and don't leave when it gets hard.
Exactly, because you have to become better and better and better and better, because what happens, she becomes more and more feminine, more needs, more this, she's going to be more critical, she's going to have more of a voice, she's going to be more wild, she's going to be more sexy, all this stuff that's going to trigger you, that's going to upset you and your masculinity and your ego. And so you got to slay that ego all the time. It's a hero's journey, and you're going to be lonely because you cannot go to her anymore. You can't go to her to be mommy anymore. You can't go to her to be your therapist. You can't go. So you got to be the one to go on your own, right your ship, get erect, be strong, be in that good space. And it can't be bullshit, because if it's bullshit, she'll figure it away. It's like a housing inspector. It's like comes in there with a fucking flashlight, sees where your shit went wrong.
There's a story there, isn't there?
No, it's so true, buddy. You got to go all the way through, and you got to make sure it's sound, and that integrity and that sound. It's what you do in private. It's what I do in private that matters. It's what I do when I'm on the computer. It's how I approach my mornings. It's how I approach my days, my nights. All of it matters. All of it matters. And that's overwhelming. And it's really overwhelming at first when you kind of shift into that point. You're like, fuck, I can't handle this. This is too much. I'm like, who the fuck am I? And it brings up all your insecurities. And then that's where, go ahead.
And why should I have to do this when she,
she gets to be a whiny bitch all the time and just talk and like,
and I've got to do everything. Yeah. And if you want her to want to fuck you, if you want to be in a relationship for 15 years and have the sex be hotter, kinkier, more intense, dirtier, more fun than it was at the beginning, yes, you have to do it, and you have to set her free.
It doesn't mean
you are expecting her to do the shit while you sit around and sit on your thumb and watch porn and watch football, smoke weed, whatever it is. Like, you can have that, but you can't have that and have a relationship that's going to work well and stay hot. Polarity does not care if you don't like it. It's going to do its thing.
Speaking of the football thing, Rachel and I both are big football fans, and she loves football, which is awesome. And when our first part of the relationship, whenever the football games were there, she would make the food. It was like a guy's wet dream. I mean, she had the food, the sex, everything. And then working with you ruined it for me. No, it's a joke, but I started paying attention to this, and I'm like, oh my God, she's the one who's erect. She's figured out the time. She figured out the menu. She was showing up, and I was like, she's actually the one who's in her masculine. Look at me. I'm getting a little drunk. I'm like sitting back. I'm like chill. And it was depolarizing. And what we've done now, what's switched is she's the one who's actually sitting there relaxed in this state. And I'm the one who's actually bringing her a drink and serving her. And this flip has done wonders for her appreciation of football. She loves it. Second, her sex, like her little sex vibe and energy. Do I want to enjoy a football game, or do I want to enjoy her sex energy? And you got to make that choice. And I think, what are we doing? What's our motivation? Do we want the energy? Do we want polarity? Or do we want just to be, to tune out? And I think that if we're making those decisions, that's fine. But I think it's really important that we make it consciously, that there's a conscious decision that we're doing. And that's where it becomes the tool of polarity. And that every single moment and then test it and see what it works. I've done that for myself, is to feel this and see like, does that work like this? And then don't judge it. And I think another big thing for me has been, when things are depolarized, not to fall flat and to figure out, take a deep breath and be like curious of myself. How can I actually switch the polarity back? Like, what are some tools to bring this back? What are some little words or phrases or energy? How can I, and that's when it becomes the craft. Becomes the tool, is when things go the other direction, how to right the ship. And I think that's why you've told me this too. Recently, I've been it was a depolarizing. You're like, be grateful for that, because now you know how to come back from that. It's just like anytime you're injured or anytime you're sad or angry, be grateful, because it gives you an opportunity to practice the craft of consciousness, the craft of bringing us from one state to another state.
One of the best ways to learn something is by screwing it up and learning from your mistakes. This comes at the expense of your ego. You have to be able to fuck things up and to not be afraid to make mistakes and fuck things up in order to learn what is it that actually makes this work. What is it that brings this intensity? What is actually turns her on? Not what's supposed to turn her on. What actually turns her on? When you realize things like, oh shit, giving her what she wants might it might appease her in the moment, but it actually doesn't turn her on. Saying no might upset her, but then also she might be really horny later that day. And you've got to be able to be in the discomfort of realizing all the ways that, like, again, polarity's been doing its thing the whole time in your relationship. It's just a matter of whether it's been doing it to you or you have been using it, to use your words here, as a tool to make things better for you and make things the way that you want them to be and make things the way that actually suit the relationship come what you want it to be. You will never, ever, ever get in good shape by sitting on the couch and eating potato chips. You will never have a long-term relationship that stays hot by just sitting back and expecting it to happen out of obligation or because she's supposed to, or blaming it on her that it's not happening. The only way it ever gets that way is if you create it as a man, period.
Yeah. And I think another way, a very specific application of that, is to see that her desire, when she desires something, when she wants something, and being able to turn that dial up and turn it down and be able to play with desire is a really powerful tool of polarity. And a good example of that is, let's go back to the sexual thing. If she's wanting sex and you say, no, not right now, or she's wanting an orgasm, or and you're too earnest or too eager, and you give into it, or you just take advantage of that, but you're not able to sort of resist. No, this is you not now. You need to do this first. This is how this is going to work. This is how it just increases that polarity. You could do the same thing with food. You could do the same thing with socializing, with TV, with any number of things. That at first, there's a skill to that, because this is where people are a little uncomfortable. They're like, you're actually telling her what to do, when to do, how to do, and keeping things from her. Like, that's what you're doing. And
yep. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Right. And there's,
for her own good, for my own good, and for the good of the relationship.
And it's risky going wrong. I mean, one of the big things that I feel like I'm a master at is being a fool. And that is, I don't mind making mistakes.
A fool or a tool?
Both, a fool and a tool. That's right. I'm the tool of polarity. No, the fool, both of them. But I don't mind making the mistake. I don't mind taking the initiative. I don't mind doing it wrong. I don't mind upsetting her. I don't mind her being like, well, I don't really want that. Or like, I'll make a move and it just goes wrong. But you've got to be willing to do that, and she'll respect you from that, because there's courage in that, and there's a innocence in that, and that's always, you learn from that. You can't learn unless you're doing. There's no learning without doing. You can't like learn to walk and then not be able to walk. Like, that's not learning to walk. You have to walk to say you learned to walk. It's the same with polarity, with relationship, with leading. Like, you got to do the thing. We can't just read about this shit. We got to be in it, doing it. And you will make mistakes.
I have no better example of this than, so it was September of, going back almost exactly 10 years ago this fall, that I really started to look at my life from an internal perspective rather than an external perspective where I was blaming everybody else for everything that was going wrong in my life. And I had an excuse, a justification, a rationalization for everything that wasn't the way that I wanted it to be. And I decided to turn that inward and look at myself. And one of the first places it showed up was this relationship between Dawn and I, which at that point we'd only been married 3.5 years. Okay, I'm going like way back here. We had only been married for about 3.5 years, and it was not going well. It was repeating the same patterns I'd gone through in my first marriage, only worse. And I could just see that it was going to continue to go downhill unless I changed something about it. There was no more obvious place that this was showing up than in our sex. And it was not that long after this that I had this moment, this absolutely humiliating moment in bed where I wanted to make love to my wife, wasn't in the mood, and she's like, I know you need it, so I'll just lay here and you can just do whatever you want to me. And it hit me like a ton of bricks how humiliating that was. her basically telling me, I don't want you, but go ahead and do whatever you want to me while I lay. And I said no. For the first time, I said no. Not only did I say no, I laid there afterwards for about an hour, and really just sitting with why it was that I was so repulsed by this, polarized by this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in retrospect, it was polarity. It hit me that I was expecting her to feel desire for me because she was supposed to, because we were married. And when she didn't, now I was blaming her like something was wrong with her. And then I looked at myself. It's like, oh, shit, I've put on 80 pounds. I'm a whiny little bitch. I hate my job. I'm under all this financial stress. This. And it's like, I looked at her that night and I said, I don't blame you for not wanting me. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want me either if I was you. Mm-hmm. Given everything that I've become in just 3.5 years of this relationship. So I'm not ever going to expect you to want to have sex with me again. I'm either going to become the kind of man that you actually, but I will never accept obligation again in my life. That was probably the first big shift where I said not just no to her, but no to this entire dynamic and the way that this has been playing out in our relationship up until this point. Mm-hmm. No, never again. The risk in that is, oh shit, I might have just cut off I've made a commitment to be with this woman, and now I may have just cut off my access to sex with her. Mm-hmm. And for a while I did.
Andrew.
But also, that inspired something in her that changed her respect for me, that changed my respect for myself, and it set us on a whole different path. Mm-hmm. And then polarity started working for me instead of working against me.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, thank you for that story. That's a very powerful, that's a really great example of what we're talking about. Very vulnerable, also an amazing story for men out there to relate to hear. There's probably, I know that there's, maybe it's not with sex, but there's some aspect of our life where we're in that. And I think one of the things that I think about, one of the words that you said is entitled. And I think that when we are not using polarity as a tool, we are unconsciously often entitled in our thinking. And so we can be in a dom sub, or at least think we're in that realm, and then do it from entitlement, where we feel like just because we are a man, just because we have a dick, just because we are a man, that we are entitled to dominance. We're entitled to leadership. We're entitled to her comply with us. That's not going to last in a healthy kind of way. That's not sustainable. And the polarity is the reality of a healthy, when something's in polarity, that's a healthy version of what we're talking about. When the polarity is squishy, or the polarity is inverse, then you have entitlement. Then we have something that's what everyone's freaking out that you're talking about to the world. And this is where it's so important that we're here talking about this, because their version is just, they're so afraid of entitlement. But we can't even talk about the fact that women want to be in a relationship where there's polarity. They do. Just like men want.
I didn't force Dawn to put a collar on.
No.
I didn't force her into submission.
No, but
she wanted this.
They want it, but women don't want to be in obligation. And so can we be mature enough? Can we be in a place where we can actually talk about the difference between the two? There's no way to talk about the difference between the two unless we understand polarity. Unless we understand that there's this energy between the two, between us, that just exists, that we can feel. If we think we're all equal, it's all the same, there is no such thing as polarity, then we can't even have this conversation. Then we're too, but that's robots. Is that, that's AI. What makes us a human being is polarity, and that's why it's so important for us to feel these frequencies. This can happen with men and men. This can happen with women and women. This can happen with they, them, with this. There's always polarity. It doesn't matter if it's where your body and what you identify as. It's that there is this thing called polarity, and we have to first become aware for ourselves. What kind of polarity do we feel best living in? What do we want to be around? That's the first step. The first step is just to acknowledge that we desire something. Like you desired in that moment. You're like, oh, fuck, I actually want her to want me. So you desired something, which is your own inner feminine. So you have your own interior feminine. We haven't even talked about this, but there's inner polarity. And the part of me that can't deal with my own desires, that can't deal with my own feminine, my own feelings, that means I can't deal then with it on the outside. If I'm not so good with dealing it within the inside, I'm not going to be able to deal with it on the outside.
Let's do a whole episode on inner polarity, because I could talk about that for an hour.
We got that. You know, Andrew, I think this has been a great conversation about polarity. I know that we like to keep these around an hour.
We could keep going for another hour, I'm sure.
It was
but
awesome, though. It was really great to dive into this. I feel like sometimes, we've been doing this for 27, 28 episodes. And each time, the more that we do it, I just feel this deeper resonance and understanding and clarity. And I hope that our listeners are getting to feel that too. Please go back and listen to our previous episodes, whether it's on my channel, that's my new DSRX studio channel, or it's over on Infinite Devotion. There's 2 different places you can do that. There's also the new episodes will be going off on this DSRX studio. So thank you for coming and listening to that. And as always, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for being here. Thank you for a great conversation. Until next week, stay, as what's his name says, stay hard, right?
Stay hard.
Stay hard.
David Goggins, stay hard.
Stay hard. But we have our, what is it? Stay polarized. That could be it. Stay polarized.
That's just the theme that runs in my head all the time when I'm working out is you have to earn it.
Yeah.
You have to earn it. You have to earn it. You have to earn it. Everything you want to gain, you have to earn it. You're worthy of it. You deserve it. But you have to take it. It's not going to be given to you.